Robert Huish is a political scientist at Dalhousie University with an expertise in international relations and sanctions. Happy to have you with us today.
Good to see you, Tom.
Help us try to put this into perspective. How monumental a day is this?
I think this is going to be a day where history will turn back to say this is now clear evidence where the Donald Trump White House, the Trump 2.0, is now putting rubber to the road and turning allies into enemies and ultimately trying to put policies into place that work against the American people. So there have been strong-headed presidents in the past. There's been tough times in the US since its inception, no doubt, but to actually have someone in the executive office whose intent is to put in policies that will make it more difficult to grow an economy, for Americans to keep their jobs in order to afford things, and then also to completely undermine the US security structure on that way too, that is something we could say, that's the day when things started to change.
Everyone is talking about the long game. What is really the intention behind all of this? Do you see this taking a long time? Is this something that is the new norm for a long time to come, do you think? Or is there something that could change things?
Yeah, I think we are in a state where we want to be hopeful and say, it's going to go back to the good old days and pick your president in the past if it's Obama or if you're a Bush fan or whatever. But I think we're past that. I think this is something where trust has been so deeply eroded by Donald Trump's White House that there's going to be no going back to the way that it was. There's going to be new opportunities for the future, but in a way that we're not going to be able to trust the executive office any further in the US as being an ally. Now that's carefully said because I don't mean the American people, right? Our Americans and Canadians, we're friends, we're family, we're natural business partners. But to see the power of the executive office pushed to this level, no matter who's in that White House afterwards, if it's a Democrat, Republican, or a third party, it will swing in one direction or the other. That's been pushed now. And what's allowing it to be pushed, Tom, is that there is no clear protest to any of this. I think many Canadians in particular are kind of edged out to say that where's the discontent? Where's this,
in the US?
In the US, where are the Americans standing in solidarity? Where are the Americans taking to protest in the public spaces that they did in Trump 1.0?
Well, where are they, do you think?
It's been dismantled strategically. Even today, Trump basically put a motion forward to say that any protests on university campuses would be deemed illegal. So there's the First Amendment to the Constitution in the trash, right? So what's the next one that he can get away with? The thing is that when we see this, if it's something as just dumb is the right word that Prime Minister Trudeau used, dumb tariffs being put into place, we see that the only counter to that is through protests, through people challenging these orders. And if it is the public, if it is state level, or if it's Congress, people need to push back on this.
What about the stock markets? I mean, we're seeing those take a nosedive.
Yep.
How long is that allowed to continue to happen before some of that protest that you talk about maybe raises its head?
That's a good point, because when you go back to, say, the financial crisis of 2008, there was a lot of protests there. You had the Occupy Wall Street, you had the Tea Party movement, and you had the stock market on a dizzying roller coaster. So that might actually trigger some corporate response to Trump, but let's not forget that he's surrounded himself with a lot of billionaire advisors, Mr. Musk included, who are starting to think that cryptocurrency might be a way out of this. And I think that really speaks to some sort of vision that Mr. Trump and some of the crony capitalists that he's got around him are wanting to see, is to stress test every system in the United States, be it financial, social, security, almost to the point of breaking.
So can they sell? I mean, for some people this does maybe sound good. It may be playing well in the United States, what's happening in the Trump administration. But how much of a sell job does the Trump administration have to do within the country if it starts to feel this pain for what could be weeks, months, or years?
Well, that's the whole thing, because you look at what Trump's done in the first few weeks of his second presidency, and very, very little of the policies he's put forward are going to see any benefit to the everyday American. And this is a country that for the last 4 years, for the last 8 years, or at least a decade or more, has really suffered with serious inequalities, right? You have 1 in 2 people in the United States that are facing bankruptcy due to health. Well, the 1 in 2 bankruptcies, I'm sorry, are caused by healthcare related costs, right? You've got all sorts of social factors in the U.S. that you wouldn't find in another G7 nation. And we see that the Americans are kind of used to dealing with these really, really harsh inequalities, but not to the point of actually overthrowing some of the constitutional packages, the existing governance that's there to say, look, we're still a nation. But the way that Trump is carrying on by dismantling internal structures, by going at the allies, and by ultimately putting policies in place that either intentionally or accidentally really fall in step with the ambitions of Mr. Vladimir Putin, once that all sort of comes to fruition and Americans realize that their commander-in-chief really has the interests of the Kremlin or his own ego above theirs, that we could start to see the kettle boiling over.
Okay, so that's the backstory as you see it. Imagine you're a Canadian government official and you're having to try to deal with this somehow. I imagine their heads are spinning as well. Do counter-tariffs really work?
No. I mean, they're symbolic. You look at tariffs, you look at sanctions, you look at anything like that where you're trying to use an economic weapon against an adversary, and ultimately we bring out those words for adversaries, not allies. It never has the desired effect. It usually lands on impacting somebody who they didn't intend to strategically hit. And that we'll just have to see how it unfolds. The premiers who are incumbent, those who will be, taking up new posts or new prime minister coming in, I think they need to realize that when they're dealing with the American people, they're still our friends, they're still our family, they're still our business partners, and putting tariffs on them might feel symbolic, but it's going to hurt the people. The real issue here is that we're dealing with an adversary in the White House, and politicians of municipal, federal, provincial, we're in for a fight, and we're going to have to fight like we're chained to the wheel.
Just before I let you go, Donald Trump is fond of recounting the history of President McKinley and tariff history. What are the lessons learned from that experience?
Well, McKinley, maybe that was the era when he decided to make America great again. McKinley, in his memoir, he regretted putting tariffs and talking about annexation during his presidency, because the annexation expansion of the U.S. occurred with President McKinley in 1898 with taking over territories from Spain, and then also serving up a litany of tariffs along the way. He regretted that afterwards because it didn't have the effects that he desired. And again, McKinley, like Trump today, surrounded by the robber barons of the era. And I think that's the similarity that we're drawing today.
We're going to be talking about this again in the future, no doubt. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.